everyone. Welcome to Umpqua Community College. My name is Rachel Pokrant, and I have the great honor of serving as president at your community college. Umpqua has served Douglas County for over 60 years, and we are dedicated to transforming lives through education, training, and service to our community. Events like this remind us that UCC plays a vital role in connecting people, ideas, and solutions for all members of the community in celebration and appreciation of a wide range of worldviews and beliefs. The college welcomes all ideas and viewpoints and encourages respectful debate. Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield, who leads the Oregon Department of Justice, is joining us for an Oregon Priorities Town Hall. Tonight's event is an opportunity for AG Rayfield to hear directly from you about the issues impacting us here in Roseburg and Douglas County, in order to shape legal strategies at the Oregon Department of Justice that best serve our state. I will introduce him in a moment, but a few logistics before we begin. First, if you or someone in your party would like ASL interpretation, we have that available. Tonight's town hall will be about an hour. We'll start with opening remarks. From there, a DOJ staff member will call upon audience members to give public comment and/or ask questions. If you signed up online or tonight in the lobby, your name is on the list. When your name is called, please walk up to one of the mics. We have 2 mics here down front. And you'll have 2 minutes to share your comments or ask a question. There'll be a timer on the stage that will buzz after 2 minutes. We ask you please to wrap up your remarks when the timer goes off so we can hear from as many people as possible. With that, I'll introduce our guest. Dan Rayfield has served as Oregon's Attorney General since December 31st, 2024. As Oregon's Attorney General, AG Rayfield is focused on championing the issues Oregons care most about: keeping communities safe, protecting working families, and upholding Oregon's values and the rule of law. In his first year in office, the Oregon DOJ created a new economic justice section and doubled the size of the consumer protection team, launched a public safety pilot program to increase collaboration between state and local law enforcement, safeguarded $4.6 billion in federal dollars for Oregon, and successfully challenged unconstitutional tariffs at the U.S. Supreme Court. He previously served in the Oregon legislature for a decade, including as Speaker of the House and co-chair of the Ways and Means Committee, where his legislative priorities consistently included investing in public schools and education, expanding access to career and technical education, and securing unprecedented bipartisan investments in the state's education system. Thank you for that investment in our future. Please join me in welcoming AG Rayfield to the stage.
I think this might be a little bit easier. I can see people a little bit better. I don't know where my glasses are, so you'll have to apologize. Again, my name is Dan Rayfield. I couldn't be more excited to be here. We spent all day in Roseburg today, kind of moving around the community, listening, whether it was out at Wolf Creek or frankly at one of our Division of Child Support offices here, listening about how we can better serve Oregonians and the work that we do every single day. And so the reason we're hosting these town halls is we're going across the state. And last year we went across the state as well. And really what we were doing is talking about some of the federal work that we're doing on the national level. That obviously, I'm sure as you read in the news, took a lot of time and a lot of oxygen out of the air. And this year what we really want to do is talk about all the different things that we do with the Oregon Department of Justice, but then also hear from community members about what you want us to work on during this upcoming year. We've released a strategic vision on some of the really important things that we're doing, small things, big things to me, from IT projects to expanding the work we do to protect working families to expanding the work we do to keeping communities safe. So a really broad range of things that we're focused on. And if you hear me talk at various things, you'll hear me talk about 3 things most often. The first one is how do we protect working families, consumers, and seniors? That's an essential responsibility that we have at the Oregon Department of Justice. We have a set of lawyers and staff that work day in and day out. And as you heard a little bit before, this was one of our first initiatives when we got into office, and we doubled the size of the attorneys and staff working in Oregon to do this work. And you're starting to see some of this come to fruition in some of the cases that we've been able to be a part of, whether it's opposing our mergers of 2 local stations up in Portland, to very other important work that we're doing on behalf of consumers and other broader consumer cases that you'll see. So that's one thing when we think about the first topic that we've been talking about for almost 2 years now. The second thing, we talk about keeping communities safe. This is a really interesting place that we are in Oregon's history. We are, when you think about some of the rural communities across Oregon, we are struggling with our cities and our counties to fund essential services from time to time. And public safety often is suffering in some of those cases. So what we're trying to do is reevaluate what is our role at the Oregon Department of Justice to meet that need to better serve Oregonians. And that's why we launched a pilot program in Washington County where we're really focusing on organized crime, using our agents as well as our attorneys, partnering with local law enforcement to dig deeper into some of the issues and the things you think about, right? Human trafficking, drug trafficking, other types of things like that you think about organized crime. And when I tell my parents, hey, we're working on organized crime, they think it's like The Sopranos, right? And so I have to like tell them, no, there's actually, these are the things you're seeing as you're driving through your community, right? So these are the things that we're working on there. And then, of course, one of the last things that we talked about, and we've been talking about this through this entire year, is how do we defend Oregon's values and the rule of law, which in this moment in time is incredibly important, that we play that role as the Oregon Department of Justice across this country. And that's something we're happy to talk a little bit more as we dig in tonight. So what I would love to do is less of me talking, hear from some of you about some of the issues that are on your mind, and if you're interested, I'm happy to respond and tell you a little bit about kind of what we're doing, or frankly, learn. What I will tell you, we were just talking about this, the president and I don't know where she went. We've visited offices across the state internally within the Department of Justice, and every single office that we go to, I learned something new. And one of the things today that we learned that was incredibly important, we have the Division of Child Support. And in these conversations, one of the things I learned is part of our responsibility is how do we connect with the people that we're trying to serve? And more people are communicating via text. With the Oregon Department of Justice, we don't have the ability to text people. So these are things to how do we modernize as an agency to better meet the need to better serve parents across the state. So these are the things that we can learn from just having conversations in community. We find them very valuable, and I just appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. All of you have many things that could be going on. You could be at home trying to find dinner, but you're here with us. So I really appreciate it. And what I'll do is I will stop talking and then allow Marta to kind of call up some folks.
All right, so I will call up names 2 at a time of folks who signed up online, and this is the timer where we'll time the 2 minutes. So first up we have Julian Gomez, and on deck is Dane Zahner.
Oh, yeah, pop over. More for everybody else to hear. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Hello, Attorney General Rayfield. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. So on March 20th, the federal government put out an ad for acquiring an office in Roseburg for Immigration Customs Enforcement, or ICE. I'm very worried about how this will affect our community safety and our way of living. I want us to consider the wine industry in the Umpqua Valley. There are over 30 wineries that take up about 4,000 acres of vineyards, and there's a significant migrant population that works these vineyards, alongside restaurants, the service industry, and much more. An ICE presence will severely negatively impact this industry, these industries, along with the tourism that goes along with it. What can you do to make sure Oregon's sanctuary laws are being upheld and convince local businesses that ICE is not welcome here? Thanks for your time.
Thank you for the question. One thing to know, this is not the first time this type of a question has come up in a community here in Oregon. Some of you might have followed what was going on in Lincoln City and saw the news where there was a potential siting of a facility in Lincoln City. What worked in that situation was partnership and collaboration at the local level. There's certain responsibilities that we have at different levels of government. And so for us in that, we had a lawsuit pre-existing already filed, and we're there to ensure that if something's going to go forward, that it is being done and the law is being followed. But there was also incredible collaboration with the local government at that time. We can provide clarity when people are, or local governments are potentially going to violate the sanctuary status law or things that are going on in those. We can be there to provide that clarity and to be able to make sure that they are operating and the rules are being followed. When those laws are not being followed, that's where we can then step in and move from there. And there's even smaller things that you may not necessarily think of. So not necessarily the case here, but say when we're thinking about Lincoln City, are there violations of our Oregon land use laws? Right, so thinking about other things. Our job in this role, we have a limited set of tools at the state level. The local level has a different set of tools. And our job is to make sure that the law is being followed under those circumstances. So right now, we are in communication and we're monitoring and paying attention to see what actually occurs. Ultimately, what I can tell you is in a lot of different things that we've seen in the Trump administration, sometimes when people say things, it happens. Sometimes when things are being said, it doesn't happen. So what we're trying to do right now, and Lincoln City was a wonderful example, right? There was a lot of buzz. We were prepared. We actually had taken some significant steps in that situation to be prepared, and then ultimately it didn't come to fruition. So for us, we're going to be in communication and monitoring and seeing how things are going and making sure that our Oregon laws are followed, and it doesn't matter what level of laws those are, whether it's land use all the way down to our sanctuary status laws.
Yeah, Dean Zener.
Thank you for being here. My name is Nate Zahner, and Douglas County resident for about 23 years. And my questions kind of deal with my family. We're both LGBTQ. This is my husband, Bill. And our marriage is really not secured in our Constitution, and even though we can get married. But the other piece is my husband's Hispanic, and he's fearful. He just related a very key story to me about his looks and appearance and wearing hats. He wear going to baseball hats now, but he's very fearful, and he shouldn't be. He's an American citizen. They're going after black and brown people. It's the atmosphere of our country right now. But I guess, my questions are, how did we get here? How do we fix this? And how do we stop this? I mean, those are just three key things. I mean, I don't know. Has anybody else had their significant other, their husband, come to you and just say they're fearful? That breaks my heart. And this is in our country, our state, and our county. It's appalling. And I don't know, how do we fix this? Nobody should be scared in America.
I agree. And I think every single one of our town halls that we've done in these conversations, this comes up. And it depends on where we are. We're talking about fear that is real in community. It is across the state in every single community. People are, some of the town halls that we've had have been incredibly emotional and passionate, to where I think it makes some elected officials uncomfortable to engage in those conversations. But I think that uncomfortableness is actually important for us to go through this and work through these issues together. This is where we are as a country. What we have to focus on is where we're headed. And this is where I get back to, we have different lanes that what we're doing to make sure that there is accountability moving forward. So when we think about, and there are unconstitutional things that are going on right now with respect to the way that ICE has acted in community. We've seen that. There have been documented. A good example of that for folks to think about is in our National Guard case in the Portland area. This was a case where we filed a lawsuit to prevent the military from the National Guard from hitting the streets in Portland before they ever stepped foot in that. Through the eventual trial that went on, there was testimony under oath where we were able to show that there were violations of people's constitutional rights under those sets of circumstances. So these things are going on. There's a rationale for why people feel the way they do, and nobody should feel like that in America. It's just the way, that is not America. So what we're doing on our end at the Oregon Department of Justice is making sure, and this is going to seem a little bit repetitive, what we're trying to do is making sure that when people step out of line, that we're making sure that we're holding them accountable when appropriate. And so whether that is on the criminal side of things, okay, and that is an incredibly high threshold, then you have a civil threshold, right? And so you're seeing a lot of civil lawsuits. Sometimes you call like a 1983 a violation of someone's constitutional rights. These are things that are going to go on in the federal courts, and it is going to eventually come in. So you think about some of the things that went on in Minnesota with some of the deaths that occurred there. There's going to be 1983 claims, if not already filed in those cases, and that will go through the civil process. And so you have the criminal context, you have the civil context, then you have the legislative context. And that's what you're seeing playing out right now in Congress, where Congress is having this debate about the executive management of DHS through the budget, right? And this is this public debate that is going on. The only reason this public debate is going on is because America has been having this conversation. And I think this is the thing that I can't overstate. If you see all of the different marches, all of the different rallies, the level of energy, frankly, from even people that voted for the president about the management of these agencies, you are starting to see a shift in the American populace, right? You'll see, and I use this joke, it's never good for the president when Joe Rogan is saying, hey, the president went too far. Even Ted Cruz, when it came to freedom of speech, said, hey, Mr. President, I think you've gone too far. So you're starting to see those things. You're seeing the populace come out, and then what you're then seeing is Congress react, and you're having this, what I would say, conversation in America about what we want our government to look like. So all of these different tools, we're doing our part here. You have individual citizens doing their part. You have local governments doing their part. You have state legislatures. We just had a legislative session, and the state legislature was taking different actions to make sure that people are being respected in communities across this state. And then you're going to have an election this fall. And I think that is where you're going to really see a pivot in how the president is able to manage this. Because if you lose majority, with something everybody knows, right? When you lose those majorities, that is going to change the way that they're able to operate, and especially when you're in control, when the budget control shifts. But even when they aren't in control right now with the budget, they're having really meaningful conversations right now. So I know that it's not the greatest answer, but it's just where we're at right now. So, and I'm sorry that you're going through this.
Scott Perkins is next with Leslie Rogers on deck.
Hi, I'm Scott Perkins. I'm a public school administrator. I'm well versed in the legal hurdles that can enable schools to operate efficiently, but can also tie our hands when challenges arise. One of my biggest concerns is in regard to students who struggle behaviorally in school. While we maintain a strong relationship with our school resource officers, parents, and stakeholders for the positive support and benefit of our students, those who find themselves suspended from school time after time may eventually drop out and may even turn to criminal activity. As an educator, I feel a sense of failure when this occurs. From your perspective as Attorney General, how can state legal systems better support schools in addressing behavior proactively rather than just reacting through discipline or the justice system?
Absolutely. And I'm going to address this in a couple different ways, because some of this relates to the work we do with the Department of Justice, but then some of this tracks in a couple of different ways. So first thing that I would say, our education system, if we're looking at the way what we're funding and where we're funding things, we have a desperate need for more counseling and services within our education system. I also think in early education, before they even get to the elementary school, we have a need in this state that is not being met. We have a need in this state right now that's not being met in the type of treatment that folks need. So my wife works at DHS and child welfare. I can't tell you how many times I will be at my house or our house, and she will come home and say, we don't have services for these children that they desperately need. And when you hear the backgrounds about where these children are coming from, it is no surprise why they're acting the way they are. And we as a state, as a community, have to figure out what are the right ways to reach these children, and we're just not doing it effectively here in the state right now. And so I think there is a responsibility legislatively, because the funding that comes down into each school district, we need help, right? That needs to be shifted. I think frankly, I think there's some policy direction with the Oregon Department of Education that can probably, and again, I see some of these things knowing that they're not my lane. Okay, so you're hearing some of my personal philosophical belief, but I don't have power. Like I have soft power, right? I can sit there and say, hey, this is what I believe, but I used to be a legislator. They're going to roll their eyes at me or say, hey, buddy, you left. So knowing those dynamics, right? I really do believe that that's an area that is ripe for us. I think that there are some of the essential services for children right now, whether they're BRS facilities or other different facilities that we lack in this state. We have put some regulations in place as legislators where sometimes we've reacted to an isolated incident, which has made it tougher for the business models of those given the fixed reimbursement rates to actually operate in the state. That needs to be changed. But that is an incredible debate right now in the legislature that they have been unsuccessful to get over the hurdle. So knowing all of those things, which I really believe, and you probably are familiar with ACEs and how do we really focus on the front end, I think we're not doing a good enough job there. Then we ask, in this meeting, in a perfect world, we'll fix that, right? And then you get into this world where we haven't done that, and we're trying to mitigate the realities of children that have not had the benefit of those services. And what do we do as a society to help people on the back end, right? In a lot of ways, that's the thing where we're feeling frustrated. And how can we help these children? And how does the criminal justice system interact with those kids? And so I will tell you a personal story. By the time I was 19, can anybody guess what my grade point average was in high school? This will be a fun one. I bet I was lower than anyone in this room. You had a 2 point? Oh, you're just guessing a 2 point. Oh, wow. I was a 2.1. Okay, so let me ask you this question, Hotshot. When I went into college right after that, did I do better or worse? I did worse. After 2 terms at Western Oregon University, I had a 1.43. Also, by the time of that point, I had been arrested 3 times in my life. And I was just struggling in life. But I was fortunate to have the right people in my life around me at the right times to, yeah, I mean, I'm just incredibly fortunate. A lot of kids do not have that fortune. And so we as a society, how are we going to meet the potential see the potential in everybody when they can't see that potential in themselves? And I think we're failing in that right now. So I think there's the early side, and then later on, this criminal justice side. I was, again, I had a very forgiving criminal justice experience. Not everybody had that same experience that I had. There were programs like diversions and other things like that where you can kind of divert people around traditional systems. So I think exploring those types of opportunities, and right now I think we're trying to do that, and I think we're moving in a better direction. Are we fully there? I don't think so, but you really are starting to see in policymakers, and I know I'm rambling on, I apologize, but I really do think in policymakers we're really starting to understand that the brain of a young adult is not mature until you get into your mid-20s. And then put that in co-occurrence with other behavioral health issues or other events that may have occurred early on in people's lives, right? And we got a lot of work to do. So it's not a great answer. Our role at the Oregon Department of Justice, what I didn't ask, is most of the local enforcement of our laws are done at the DA level and are not done at the Department of Justice. So we don't have a lot of interaction prosecuting younger cases like that. We assist district attorneys, and we handle organized crime work and internet crimes against children. But this is an area where I'm in a room with district attorneys who are all independently elected and have their own philosophies about how they want to improve community safety. But like I'm a big proponent of sharing my own experience and trying to, so people can see a different way.
Leslie Rogers with Melissa Sherwood on deck. And if Leslie's not here, Melissa, if you're here, come on up. Betsy Cunningham. Kevin Hansberger.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Get the Oregon State shirt on.
Oh, yeah, it's my alma mater.
I live in Corvallis, so.
I was going to ask, since Oregon joined several other states against the Nexstar-Tegna merger, I was wondering if those similar states follow suit against the Paramount-Warner Brothers merger, if Oregon would also join them and be a member of that, to be a member of those suits?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the Tegna Nexstar first, and then let's get to Paramount really quickly. Are people familiar with the antitrust case? A couple of heads shaking yes. effectively, what you're doing is taking 4 stations with 4 independent editorial voices and merging 2, and you're losing editorial voice. And this is something that has been going on and has the potential to continue to go on in our communities. Where we lose this editorial voice, it is consolidated. It's a very dangerous thing that can happen. Right now at the national level, what is going on? This is very interesting. There has been less of an interest in enforcing our antitrust laws. And what you're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. right now. So you're seeing some mergers, frankly, being greased or moving through very quickly. A really good example of this would be Ticketmaster. This was a case that some people may not be familiar with. We're involved in. This is filed in, it's called Live Nation, but it's filed out in New York the night before the trial. And you got to know the dynamic here. We heavily rely upon federal resources to move these cases forward. So this case has been moving forward for an entire year, and then the night before the trial, the federal government says, hey, we've settled. Then you have all the states. We had a Sunday conversation. These are the most incredible bipartisan conversations. So on Sunday, I got on in my home on a Zoom with all of the attorneys general from across the state, and we're talking about what are we going to do tomorrow at trial in front of a judge, because we got to go to trial. And we were not satisfied with the negotiation that the federal government did because we believe they caved. And it wasn't good enough for consumers. And this is the beautiful thing about this world. You have Republicans and Democrats talking about, okay, let's put our teams together, we're gonna get in there. And it's actually this beautiful moment that people don't see in America right now, where we were then in this courtroom for the past 2 weeks arguing this case, while we then were able to keep negotiations open. But this is an incredible resource strain on all of us. And this isn't just happening with Live Nation. You have Tegna Nexstar. This is another area where, again, the president makes comments. There's impropriety that is alleged about why this merger was allowed to go through. We have the right as states to step in and say, no, this does not meet the standards. We're going to do that. So that's what we did in this case, because we really risk diluting the editorial voice. At the same time, there's access fees. It will increase the cost for all of us through some of these fees that you get paid as they start to have more of a monopolistic impact on the market. So that's one issue. That one was worked up. We had, frankly, we'd done the research. We were ready to go. All of us said, let's move in. I think only 8 states were engaged in that case. We are now monitoring and investigating the Paramount case as we're building that up. If the same circumstances present, which I can tell you, hey, there's a lot of smoke right now, but if those same circumstances present, we will actually unquestionably be moving forward in a case to block that merger. But again, we want to sit there and make sure that we have our ducks in a row and make sure you go through the investigation before we just jump out and start doing something.
Mike Kelly is next with Bill Romo on deck. Mike, are you here? Great.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name's Annette Kelly. I usually do all the paperwork and everything. I put his name on it. Anyway, as a woman, I am very concerned about Oregon's stance against ICE for picking up criminals who've been arrested for serious crimes, and the local police are unable to cooperate with ICE to get those people who've committed horrible things. I have a great niece who lives in Portland, and I'm scared for her. She is a woman of color, and she's in her 20s, and I'm afraid one of these days some harm is going to come to her, because we do have these criminals on our streets. We have no cash bail, where someone's arrested and they're out on the street the next day. I'm very fearful of that. I don't understand why the state of Oregon is against picking up these people who are causing problems, and our communities are not safe.
First, thank you. This is a very important policy conversation the state is having right now. Frankly, the country's having right now.
Yeah, I understand that.
What I want to do is take you back to where the conversation originally started in Oregon, and that was in 1987. There was a bill by a Republican to put forth the first sanctuary status law in the country. It was passed almost unanimously. It was passed unanimously in the House and in the Senate, was bipartisan, and has peacefully coexisted with every single presidential administration since then. And so one of the things is we start thinking about what's going on right now, what's different right now, and why is this debate cropping up right now in the certain context. The other thing that I want people to think about and do their own research on is go look at law enforcement professionals, district attorneys, and talk about what they need to do some of their jobs. One of the most compelling things, and it doesn't come from me, it comes from the district attorney in Washington County, Kevin Barton. And what he talks about, really importantly, is that he needs the tools to be able to do his job. And so having courthouses that are safe spaces. So when you have an immigration system where you have people who cannot go into the courtroom and be witnesses, he'll talk about his experience as a district attorney, having to beg somebody in a murder trial to get them to be a witness in a case to improve
And I understand
public
that,
safety.
and I understand that
Yeah.
that's originally what sanctuary
Yeah.
meant, that illegals could comfortably report to the police crimes being given, but now that's been twisted, and criminals are being let out that shouldn't be.
So that's not exactly what's going on. But what just, I think, kind of talk about how these things are kind of being implemented over the history, I think is really good too. So as we're going through this process, your local jails have decisions to make. One of the things that we've prioritized in Oregon is empowering our local sheriff, empowering our police chief, our judges, our DAs to make what is the best public safety decision in a community, not politicians in Washington making judgments about what's going on in a community. Now, how does that play out? So let's assume that someone is going to be released out of a county jail for a nonviolent crime, okay? And they're being moved out. If they have other folks, and that person has what we call a civil action for immigration, right?
So they're
'cause
not
there's
here
civil.
legally.
Yeah, they're civil. So this is important for constitutional rights, civil versus criminal. So this is very important distinction. So and there's actually some case law in Oregon that prevents us from detaining people who only have a civil detainer because it would be in violation of the United States Constitution. So what goes on right now and how people work about that, every single county jail, even DOC, actually post the release times for the folks that are coming out of those institutions. So it's not that this information is hidden or people can't find it, but what it allows, say, the local jail, and I come from Benton County, we don't have ample bed space. We rent beds in other communities because we have been unable to pass a public safety levy to expand, or bond, I should say, to expand our local jail. So what we are doing is making safety decisions relying upon the local judge and other folks to say, this is someone who's violent for the community, this one is someone who's not, being able to make that as opposed to people in Washington, D.C. making judgments about what is safe in our communities. And so I can tell you personally, and I think this is a respectful debate that we can have as a community, as a state, and I think that's important. Where I personally stand, I trust my local law enforcement to make those decisions because we work with them. And I think, and I know that in these policy conversations, we can disagree with each other, but I know for an absolute fact that I have a family. I've got a 14-year-old. I've got a wife. We all want our communities to be safe. No one's sitting here, and this is the fallacy of these political campaigns. You're going to see these ads for both candidates, and they're always going to claim Dan Rayfield wants bad education. Marta wants bad education. I've never met anybody that wants bad education.
No, we all want clean water,
Yeah,
too.
right. We all want clean water. We all want to be safe in our communities. We demand, and we should expect to be safe in our communities. So I'd be happy to spend more time with you and kind of walk you through at least and you and I may not agree, right? But I'm happy to at least walk you through where I'm coming from on some of those things. But I think everybody here wants to be in a safe community.
Yeah,
So,
we want criminals off our streets.
Yeah, I agree. We do too.
Okay.
Absolutely, criminals should not be on our streets. And that's what we actually work to prosecute criminals at the Oregon Department of Justice.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for sharing too.
Thank you. Bill Romo and John Bloom on deck.
Hi, Bill Roman. Thank you for being here. First off, as far as the ICE goes, I think it is a major fallacy put on by both parties or certain people of parties that immigrants are typically criminals. First off, that is just a ridiculous idea, because it's been proven that there are very, very few criminals, hardened criminals, that are actually being arrested. And like Dana said, I'm now all of a sudden kind of in the crosshairs. I'm Hispanic. I've recently grown a beard. I have to now worry about if we get an ICE facility here in Roseburg. ICE has already been proving that they're randomly searching out brown people, brown and black people. You know, so that puts a target on my back. I was born in Southern California. You know, I'm a citizen. I've lived in Oregon since 1978. And I've never ever, I'm out, I'm gay. I've never ever had the fear for that as much as I do being arrested just because the color of my skin. And now that I have a beard, I don't really like wearing, I like wearing a hat. I don't like wearing a baseball cap, but in order to blend in better, I have to. Because if I wear a knit cap now with my beard, I look more Middle Eastern, which makes the target even bigger on my back. And I feel that if we have a facility here in Roseburg, that's going to give all the little racist rednecks that are around even more ability and more freedom, or feel like they have more privilege, to make my life even scarier. So, you know, anything that you could do that can stop ICE from coming in.
So, and again, kind of similar to the question we were talking a little bit before, what we need to see is how things are going, working on partnership with the local levels to monitor that. We're trying to be creative in how we can talk with local governments and how we can collaborate. So there's an interesting thing, there's a statute in Oregon where we actually can't provide legal advice to other folks in the state. So what we have been doing is looking at toolkits to make sure that people understand their rights. We've been engaged in where we may not have standing, and that's kind of just a fancy way for a judge would say, hey, you're not the one being harmed, we'll kick you out of court. We've been finding creative ways where there was a case in Southern California, right, where there was evidence that ICE in Southern California was making decisions based upon the color of people's skin, right, in the arrest. And so we were active in that case saying, hey, constitutional rights apply to all of us, right? And we were active in that. That was initially successful. That's up on appeal. You have other ways that we're, what I would say, coming at this in different angles to kind of make sure that our Constitution is being enforced. It does not change the fact that in this intermediate period in time and the way that they are acting, that I don't think the change happens overnight. Right? I don't think that we rebuild that sense of security and community like over a period of a couple of months. I think that's something we're going to have to work at. And some of that is going to come through enforcement, some of that is going to come through Congress, and then some of that is going to come from individuals as well. So, and again, these are really tough long-term questions where I think it is going to take a really long time to build back that trust, almost like very similar to the way it's going to take a long time to rebuild our federal workforce. Our federal workforce has been depleted. And if you're working in any job, what you want is continuity and stability. And it's this wild world right now where there's an exodus of folks from federal employment. And that is, again, also, I think, this hidden cost of what's going on right now that we're going to have to rebuild from over a long period of time. So I think there's a lot of damage that's been done, and we're going to have to, it's going to take time. We're doing everything that we can to make sure that we're enforcing these laws, though.
Ralph Madrigal. Andrew Rosales.
Thank you for being here. We don't often get many people coming down to our community, so I do appreciate you being here. I am currently running for public office, and we've been doing a little bit of a meet and greet around the county to talk to folks. And one of the things that we found is that I've spent a lot of time talking with folks around Douglas County, and one of their concerns I hear constantly is about transparency and the potential of corruption in the local decision-making process. In some cases, those concerns go beyond rumors. People point to documented situation and are willing to come forward as witnesses. For example, there are allegations about misuse of public funds tied to the creation of county positions and concerns around landfill practices that may have led to serious environmental and operational impacts. Regardless of the specifics, people in this county do have a mistrust of government, and part of that mistrust comes from a lack of accountability and even cursory investigations. I saw on your list of priorities that transparency and accountability wasn't on there. Will you commit to adding those to your priorities?
Well, it actually, it's not the three that I talk about out loud, but if you go and look at our vision statement for the next year, transparency is actually on there. We have a transparency initiative and a bunch of things that we're working on. I would also talk about that in terms of public accountability, whether it's elected officials or folks working in state government or in local government, right? When people, and you'll see some of that in some of the cases that we've taken on in this last year, where we have actually done and gotten engaged in some pretty significant cases where we've been able, through an investigation, to be able to determine that there's something we can prove. And so what I would say the open part of this for us is if you're seeing things in the community, often the first place you go when you're thinking about whether it's criminal or that's ethics issues, often you go to your local police or you'll go to your ethics commission at the state level. Sometimes that's not good enough, and people get frustrated. We get referrals from across the state. Sometimes it's a conflict referral. So a local DA might say, hey, there's a conflict here, would you please look into this?
Right, because they're funded through, the DA is funded through the county commissioner, so there's kind of a built-in, dissuasion.
These are the things that we are, no, this is great. These are the things that we're very interested in. I couldn't agree with you more, and it doesn't matter what your party affiliation is. I think that we, as the public, expect that we should hold our public elected officials to a high standard, right? And we should expect that they follow those standards. And when they don't, they should be held accountable. And so those are things that we're very open for referrals. If you're seeing things that are inappropriate, or in one of the town halls, there was surprisingly, you brought up the landfill issue. This is the second town hall where landfills have come up, and some of the different issues that have gone on there. So in that results in us saying, pausing, let's take a look at that. Now here's the challenging thing. Sometimes we, as a community, the criminal standard's very high, right, beyond a reasonable doubt. Sometimes we can know things, but we can't prove it in court, right? And so getting as much information as possible to lead us to those areas, that's something we're definitely open to looking at. So,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. What office are you running for?
I'm running for county commissioner.
You are running for county. And
Position number 3.
okay, position. Well, very nice to meet you.
Yeah. Andrew, results.
Next up, Vila Grindberg.
First off, I wanted to say, I wanted to give you personal thanks. I saw your name leading up a charge of a number of different states for protecting trans rights for, gender non-conforming youth and trans kids last year. So I wanted to give my thanks about that one. That's awfully important for myself, just being a trans person as well as having a trans kid. So yeah, today is a little bit of a special day. It's also March 31st. It's Trans Day of Visibility. It's part of the big thing. Second off, we've seen a lot of stuff here in the past year. And even in the past last month, the state of Kansas revoked all of every trans person's license, essentially making them, basically at that point, having to withdraw their license and have them go back to basically go get a new license at that point. We saw the state of Tennessee essentially set up a list of trans people to just essentially, keep track of them, whatever it might be. Idaho, our neighbors, just right over there to the east, double punch of bathroom bill. That carries up to a 5-year sentence. just for a simple offense, which could actually, honestly, harm non-trans people just simply by not looking like the correct gender, as well as having another trans-related issue towards trans kids as well, by essentially having some issue with making it so that they have to be reported by educators, doctors, all that sort of stuff, and carrying penalties from that point. I guess I just want to ask the question of what are you seeing here in the future as we're continuing to go along and move through this? What are you seeing? What are you hoping to achieve, continuing to work towards making sure that we all stay safe in our communities? Thank you.
And one of the interesting things, whether it's gender-affirming care, whether it's how we treat everybody in our communities with respect and equality, this is something that we've been moving forward with at the Oregon Department of Justice, and you'll see a lot of cases. Out of the 58 cases that we filed, 11 of those have been here in the state of Oregon. And I think what's really important for us as Oregon to lead with our values on these issues. And so you'll see that come out of our office at the Oregon Department of Justice. The other component of that, there's other, what I would say, ancillary issues that are going on. There was a Supreme Court decision. I apologize, it's been a long day. It was either this morning or yesterday.
It was actually this morning.
It was this morning, okay. It was a conversion therapy. Yeah, so you're seeing a shift in kind of this, again, a monster wedge issue about othering people, and this is just kind of a pattern of what's going on. And then what is our role in these moments? So we're playing our role. You have the Oregon legislature, which is doing what I would say in the policy arena and space, and then you have the governor who's operating from an executive position. And I think the combination of all three working together is like where we're at here in Oregon. I think, again, it doesn't change this national landscape that we're working within, that we're seeing. And it is, I think there are some things that I see nationally where I see some very encouraging things. And then there's times where, you start to see some rulings, and that wasn't one of our cases. It was in a different state on that conversion therapy, but it is, we have an anti-conversion therapy law here in Oregon, right? So, and I remember because we passed it when we were in the legislature. So.
Well, those are all of the names that signed up in advance, but we do have time if there's maybe one, maybe two questions from the folks gathered here. Was that a hand? I saw that hand first. Come on down.
You also need to know that right back there, Jody, raise your hand. We went to law school together.
Wow.
And we were in this vicious negotiation competition, and she beat me. And it has been years. And the first time I saw her today, she reminded me of that fact. That's why she's a good lawyer. So, yeah.
Hi there. I'm a local nurse here in town, and what I want to ask you about is women's rights. So ADF went to the file within the courts and basically gutted Roe versus Wade. That also affected HIPAA laws. And I was wondering if you were working with the legislation to kind of protect, maybe not on because we can't touch the federal level right now, but maybe on a state level, to work with HIPAA laws and ensuring women's rights, because the two kind of go hand in hand. And if there's anything that you're doing currently, working with the legislation or implementing, like where are you at with that whole situation?
Yeah, really good question. And this is one of those areas where when I left the legislature, a lot of the legislative work is being done by, for instance, like your House chair on healthcare or the Senate chair on healthcare. So they are leading those conversations. When I was in the legislature, we led, actually, it was one of the largest groups that created House Bill 2002, and that was when I was Speaker of the House. It was one of the most forward-thinking bills in terms of making sure that reproductive health care was enshrined in all different ways here in the state, also with protections in the wake of Dobbs when that was overturned. And so very active in that world. Now I've moved into a different space where we're focused on making sure that, for instance, when what was that, HR 1 got passed, the way that bill was funded actually targeted Planned Parenthood in a way that it was the only institution, save for one other specific place, that was being targeted for not even dollars that are used for abortion, but dollars that are used for preventative, what we would call essential health care, like cancer screenings and a whole bunch of other things along those lines. That were being targeted in that way. So we've been active in cases along those lines because that is now my lane in this role, to kind of make sure that the laws and the Constitution are being followed in those conversations. Of course, when we're asked by the legislature, hey, can you consult or be a part of these conversations, we're a part of those conversations as they come up. When the agencies are asking us for legal advice, we're a part of those conversations. And so that's kind of where our role is right now. It's a little bit different than where we were before, or at least where I was, the different responsibilities I had in a different role. I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I see one more hand all the way in the back.
I guess I have to say my name. I'm Christina Hilliard. You see a white girl in front of you. I am adopted by an immigrant, and her biological son has been a police officer in Douglas County for 30 years now. I never in my life thought that I would have to tell my mother to be sure to take her partner with her and don't go to the store by herself where she's at in Oregon. It isn't about criminals. When it comes to ICE, when we look at the numbers of who they've taken without any due process, without even the ability of showing their identification or that they're legal to be in the United States. So, therefore, I would like to get just a clarification and a follow-up from you. You said concerning the possible ICE offices in Douglas County that you would be monitoring the situation and communicating. So what does that look like with our local offices? Who does the communicating with your office? And could you just kind of paint the picture for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
And I think we can talk about, this is very new and has recently cropped up into our office during this past week. And so what I want to do is talk about what it looked like in Lincoln City. It may look differently here depending on the relationships. So a little bit of this is to be seen because this is so new about what we're learning. And there is a subset of questions that frankly I don't have answers to yet. And frankly, the attorneys that we have in our office, I'm not sure that they necessarily are in the loop or have answers either right yet is the present moment. So that's why you'll hear a little bit of vagueness in like what will this exactly look like here. The way it looked like in Lincoln County was interesting things that were going on at the time. First off, you had the helicopter that was being removed from the area. So they were not following federal statutes, and this feels weird to start here. At the same time, there was the talk about putting a new facility in at Lincoln City in that area as well. And this was going to be done. There were questions about land use. There were a whole bunch of other questions that were going on. So in that community, we had a lawsuit filed to make sure that the helicopter for the safety of folks on the beach stayed in Lincoln City. That was successful. We then amended our complaint to be ready so that way and again, it was very early on, we weren't really knowing exactly how things were going to unfold. And so we were just waiting and monitoring to see what occurred. Because sometimes, and again, I think I said this before, sometimes the administration will say one thing, or this was private contractors saying one thing, and then sometimes another thing happens. So we have to, and we'll talk about this in the office, so we need to see how things are being papered. There's a way for things to be papered where you could do this. You could follow land use laws. You could follow those things. You're abiding by the sanctuary status laws, and everything is being done. There's other cases where those aren't going on. And so for us, we were watching to see how it was papered. We were prepared that in the event that it was in violation, that we would be able to be there to support the local folks to then be able to move forward if they were opposing that and moving in court on those issues. So we were able to be there in a support capacity. Depending on the type of case and how these things are, and I think I mentioned this a little bit before, sometimes the state does not have standing to do, depending on the type of case. And so, again, we have to see how things are going to unfold here and how that is going to transpire before we actually know exactly what that looks like. Part of the issue, when I say communication and cooperation, what was successful in Lincoln County is that we had dialogue. right? And we were able to hear on the ground what was going on, so that way we could take steps to be ready in the event that something went awry or that our laws weren't being followed. So that's kind of this early stage that, at least where we're at right now, where having that communication, where a lot of the feedback we're getting right now is, you know, from the media and not necessarily directly from the horse's mouth. Now, granted, I have been out of the office all day today, so there could have been a ton of updates today that I'm not privy to. So I always put a big asterisk when I've been running around outside of the office. But this is something that is on you know, our list to make sure that there is constant communication, so we can know what's going on and make sure that laws are being followed. Again, who has the authority in that? Most likely that's going to be the local authorities, which will have the responsibility to act under the circumstances. But again, we're going to have to wait and see exactly how things are transpiring. So I know that is not the greatest answer, but it is. I'm just trying to be as accurate as I can be, so, and without misleading either. So.
Great. All right, we're about 4 minutes to the top of the hour, so do you want to offer any closing remarks?
Well, again, it's 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, so I appreciate you all taking time out of your evenings to be here today. I appreciate, honestly, like even what she is. She's a Green Party member. Neither of them voted for me in the primary. So that's, I can't tell you how many times I've told that joke. So I was saying, you know, but it is, that's the life that I live. But we've always been able to have incredibly respectful conversations, you know, because we all love each other, right? And ultimately, like we're all, in the end, we're all shooting for the same end. You know, ain't arguing that. So anyway, I just really appreciate the time. The other thing that's really important, you mentioned it, transparency. And that is something that we really do care about. If there are things that are coming up, please reach out. There are cards out there. If there's things going on, we do want to be accessible. That's very important to us. This won't be the last time we'll be here. But we had like a fun time. I have tons of questions that I have to come back and ask from all the places that I've been at today. So genuinely appreciate your time and welcoming us to the community today. So, and then I will turn it over to your amazing president of community college. And what you should know is after I got that 1.4, after my 2 terms at Western Oregon University, I eventually went to community college, and I got my first 4-point at community college. So there you have it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to UCC and to Douglas County. I think somebody already mentioned it, but we're not always used to seeing folks down here. And when people come from the state, we are really impressed when you listen and learn with us. And so thank you for doing that all day today and here at the college with all our fine folks. And thank you for coming out to the college. We really appreciate you. It makes me proud to live in this community. Your very thoughtful questions and comments this evening. And we hope to see you back here for athletics, for music, for performing arts, or to walk your dog on our beautiful campus. Thanks for coming out, and travel safely home.